just half an hour after the shooting. But there's also video of Zimmerman's interview with police afterward. This has not been made public yet. There's also potentially evidence from Zimmerman's clothing that night and from Trayvon's autopsy, which has also not been made public. Star, how could prosecutors use any of this evidence at trial?
This is some of the most powerful evidence, depending on what it's showing. It will show one way or the other, but this is the evidence that, one, if it was collected correctly. I've been involved either in prosecuting cases or commenting and reporting on cases where the forensics can be contaminated based simply on the investigators themselves and the investigation they conducted. So we have to, one, establish that it was not a tainted investigation. Assuming that it is not tainted and you have good forensics, you've got the photographs of Mr. Zimmerman, you've got that wonderful interrogation tape in theory, so that the prosecutor has the ability to examine what he said, when he said it, if his story is consistent, has it changed over time, did it change during those multiple hours that they were doing the investigation. All of that is wonderful for cross-examination purposes, and it certainly would be admitted into evidence if the prosecution wanted to use that videotape. Now, curious enough, if the defense wanted to use the videotape for the statements, and I'm talking the proposed interrogation tape, then the defendant will probably not get to use it because it's a self-serving statement. The defense would have less opportunity. Now, they could use, if they wanted to show something physically, what he looked like, if there's some photographs, as I said, with measurements of alleged wounds on Mr. Zimmerman, everybody would have the opportunity to use that.
Now, let's talk about the witnesses. The police will play a role, but we could also hear from neighbors and 911 callers. The funeral director who said Trayvon's body showed no sign of struggle, and Trayvon's girlfriend who was on the phone with him moments before his death.
Let's take them one by one. Let's start with the funeral director. The funeral director is almost like a pathologist would be allowed to testify as to the condition of the body when it came to him.
Right.
And so he would be allowed to testify what he saw. I'm not sure if he'd be qualified as an expert. I'm sure the defense would have a problem with that, but he might even be qualified as an expert because that's really what he did.
Right.
And we know that he has already said publicly that there were no marks that he had to use his expertise to cover up. That's really powerful evidence. Let's talk about this young lady on the telephone. I understand that the prosecutor has finally interviewed her, and I was glad to know that her mother was there because this is going to be very trying on this young girl as we go through this process. She would become the voice of Trayvon Martin in that courtroom. She's the person who had him on the telephone, and if she can bring the emotion of his fear at that time, I think she will speak for the dead, and it's very rare that you have the opportunity to do that. There are going to be some hearsay issues, whether or not she should be able to get it in. The prosecution will have lots of theories on the hearsay exceptions. One of them could be used as maybe a dying declaration if there was any indication that Trayvon knew that he was dying or was close to great physical bodily injury that could lead to death. I think there's some arguments to be made for that. You know, we've talked about Robert Zimmerman, the father, as a potential witness. I don't know if he would be able to testify because everything he says is hearsay. There's some theories that you could get over it in terms of an exception to the hearsay rule, excited utterances, spontaneous conversation. However, from what he has described, it seemed like his son was just having a conversation with him about the incident, and that would definitely be hearsay.
Star Jones, thank you so much for coming on the show tonight.
You got it.
Still ahead, since when did it become all right for a United States Senator to call the President of the United States stupid? What happened to respecting the office, Senator? The strange and ugly talk coming from the right wing. Stay with us.